Paladins is dead. Like, for real this time. Like, actually, like, there's official articles about it and everything. Smite is dead as well, which is really crazy. You know, Smite, the game that they said they wouldn't kill in favor of Smite 2, got killed in favor of Smite 2. Essentially, Hi-Rez did about 60 layoffs company-wide, pulling all of their resources to focus on Smite 2, which also had some layoffs, surprisingly. Some of which being devs that had even been with the game for a decade. So, all while the CEO, of course, still has a job. Gotcha. The good news is both games still have live servers for the time being. They're just receiving 0 new content whatsoever. No bug fixes, no skins, nothing. So now is the perfect time to update all of your champion guides because they won't get some random major rework out of nowhere. Now, I'm newer to the Paladins community, but I've been playing the game for several years, since about Koga. When he came out, I played it on the Switch because it was a free game I could play on the Switch for free without spending any money, you know? But surprisingly, I fell in love with it. The magical world, the deck system, the art style, the almost equal sexualization ratio across the genders. Paladins had a lot of good stuff going for it, but unfortunately, it had a lot of bad stuff as well. I'm an optimist. I always look on the bright side, but even I'm not surprised by this. And if you had been playing the game at all recently, I really don't think it should have come as a surprise too. It came out of nowhere, but like, I was expecting it. What really tied the knot for me was what is now their final event pass, which is quite literally just diamond chests. And the one before that was a bunch of recolors. And the one before that was literally just recycled content, a flashback event pass. And above all of that, the last released champion was over 2 years ago. And also really sucks that the game is dying with only 59 champions. And the last one is Omen. Omen. If you ask me, Paladins has been on the struggle bus for the past 2 years. There hasn't been a time when Paladins hasn't been on the struggle bus, let's be honest. But I feel like the past 2 years is really when this decline kind of began. And while the majority of the blame absolutely does belong to the CEO and the leadership at Hi-Rez for not giving the game the proper resources to succeed, I don't want to lie and act like the dev team is completely innocent here. Yes, Hi-Rez performed layoffs, cut funding, and internally messed up Paladins beyond repair. It's absolutely their fault that Paladins died. It's 100% a leadership kind of deal. Rather than giving it a dev team with proper funding, leadership, and advertising, oh my gosh, advertising, it put together a team that had very little unification and little funding to function properly. What I want to talk about is Paladins' last couple of years and why things didn't get better. If you ask me, the downfall of Paladins started shortly after Nyx came out. At first, things were going good. We had a new champion that wasn't overpowered on release, a fully animated trailer for that new champion, Payload had just come back into the main game, and we had a new community manager who seemed really enthusiastic on community feedback. I feel like early 2023 was the last peak of Paladins, and here is where it started to downfall. The dev team, rather than creating a solid structure to build off of, chose to make drastic changes, often against community feedback, waste time trying to make those changes work, only to ditch them in the long run. If I had to describe these past 2 years in a sentence, it would be this: Paladins still feels like it's in beta. The game had very little direction, leaving it in a floaty state with 0 actual foundation to keep it going. There were too many massive, gigantic changes coming out of nowhere to solve random issues that come out of nowhere. There were new game modes being thrown out of left field. There were new mechanics being added in, so many gigantic reworks and whatnot. It was hard to really feel like I was actually playing a finished game. It felt like it was still in beta. It didn't feel completed. And rather than try to make it feel completed, the devs in this time period chose to experiment for some reason. February 2023. The first example of these drastic changes I'd like to bring up would be keywords. In response to the double support meta, which if you ask me, wasn't that problematic, the devs came up with keywords as a solution. Rather than actually adjusting the problematic champions, keywords would give slight damage and healing boosts to select supports based on which talent they would pick. The devs would also balance those select champions around these keywords. If that isn't the most band-aid solution to a problem ever, then I don't know what is. That's literally just a top-down philosophy rather than going for the root of the issue. And the community felt this way too. People hated keywords from the start. The partner Discord had pushback, the test servers had pushback, and naturally when they implemented them anyways, the live servers had pushback. Instead of listening to the community from the start, the dev team would waste about a year hyper-focused on 4 supports, trying their darndest to make a square peg fit into a circular hole. Then, about a year later, keywords would be removed. All of that time, effort, and energy used for nothing. Time that could have been spent elsewhere. Gone. True, we learned what not to do. Experimenting can yield wonderful results. But the thing is, the community already told the devs what not to do. The community said this would be a waste of time. And look what happened. It was a waste of time. October 2023. Next up came the Kasumi rework. Now, Kasumi had been out for a while now. She came out, was obscenely overpowered, so overpowered I actually quit the game for a couple weeks. And then they nerfed her into the ground so they could come up with a solution without disrupting the players. And eventually, they came out with the Kasumi rework. The first time a champion would be shifting classes in years. They swapped Kasumi from a damage to a flank, and it was actually kind of great. It was handled excellently. She wasn't overpowered, still incredibly weak, but she was in a much better state than before. And she felt much better to play against while still retaining her core kit. Did she take a few more patches to get into a solid state? Yeah, but that's the idea with live service games. You adjust as the players feel them out. This was one of the few times where community feedback was actually implemented successfully, and unfortunately, it would be one of the last. January 2024. Shortly after Kasumi's rework would come the item store overhaul, another controversial change that brought some good and some bad. Namely, I'd like to talk about the changes this made to some of Paladin's most core mechanics, damage reduction and crowd control. The majority of the item store changes were handled pretty decently. Most of them didn't make any gigantic shifts or changes, except for these ones. You can make an argument that Bloodbath was a big change, but that one was a lot less controversial than these. Before, both damage reduction and crowd control were covered by one item each: Haven and Resilience. And even before that, damage reduction was handled by two separate items. Now, instead of going back to that past system, the devs wanted to try something new. They split damage reduction into weapon damage and ability damage, and crowd control into knockups and knockbacks, slows, and then literally everything else. These changes were also received warily by the community. They were confusing and just weird. Like, what qualified as weapon damage? Did Leon's entire kit get countered by one item? What do I buy to counter Bomb King's weapon? Like, cause his weapon is his sticky bombs, but the detonate deals the actual damage, but that's an ability. And a lot of people were suggesting they go back to Blast Shields, Haven, make it area of effect damage and direct damage, but they wanted to try something new. So they tried something new. Crowd control was weirdly hit too, with a niche item turning into two even more niche items that just did the same thing. There really wasn't much of a change and it was just weird. None of this even matters though, because about a year later, these changes would also be reverted. Now damage reduction was covered by AoE damage and direct damage, the former system that many players suggested before all of this time was wasted. Crowd control was shifted back to Resilience as well, with Sentinel still sort of existing, I don't know. So yet again, all this time and energy was spent on a major change only for it to be reverted to what the community wanted at the start. Do you see the pattern here? All the while these major changes are happening, they are also doing massive balance patches. They were completely shifting champions kits. Vora now has some weird support talent that barely functions properly. Furia has Cherish in base kit now, and then a weird damage boost talent, and now Solar Blessing is her best talent of all things. Grover's talents got reworked. Nyx's most impactful damage card got slaughtered. There's a lot happening. This teeny tiny dev team that was trying to advertise itself as an indie group was taking on massive projects. Major balance changes, new game systems and game modes, tons of bug fixes with somehow more and more bugs popping up, all the while there's zero sense of direction guiding any of it. It really felt like they were just throwing everything at the wall and seeing what sticks. The biggest victim of all of this and the best example of all of this is Seris. Seris. They have no fucking idea what to do with her. Seris is one of the older champions, and randomly in 2023, they decided she needs every single change you could possibly give to a champion. She's a heal bot. People just heal bot with her, and we don't want that. So we're going to give her a literal heal bot talent that lets her heal while invincible. Obviously that didn't work, so how do we fix that? I don't know, give her a burst heal talent. Seris with a long range burst heal. I wonder if there are any other champions in this game with a similar ability who also are being changed constantly by the devs. Oh, what do you know? Let's just make Seris into Furia, because why not? Next, they made Agony base kit for some reason. Half of this girl's original kit is in her base kit now. I don't know what to say. Seris was fine. She was completely fine. If you wanted to damage a lot, go Agony. If you wanted to heal bot, go Mortal Reach. But now let's put it all into her base kit. Let her do both at the same time and then give her some random ass talents that don't do anything significant. Everyone is just gonna go Soul Collector now anyways, because her other playstyles are base kit, so what other choice do you have? Why would you need to go any other talent? Fuck it, let's give her an alt boost talent and make Soul Collector base kit too, because that's engaging. Let's just get rid of talents altogether and inflate everyone's kit. Why not? The issue here is A, they made changes without securing Seris's identity, and B, they stopped looking at talents as part of a champion's kit. Seris is a beginner-friendly support with potential for oppressive damage and crowd control. You want to deal damage? Go Agony. You want a heal bot? Go Mortal Reach. You want more self-sustain to live longer in any scenario? Go Soul Collector. Paladins is a role-based hero shooter. You're supposed to fill out the role your team demands, not be all in one. That's why there are multiple loadout slots, which they did add more in this time period, so that's a quick positive. But why isn't Ying getting this treatment? She's a heal bot too. Why is Seris the one getting messed up beyond repair? There are plenty more issues that arose in these past 2 years, and there are a lot of solid changes. They removed Omen's damage boost card, although they've now left him in a bugged state forever. They gave Barrack some nice buffs. Willow got an amazing passive that pushed her right into the meta, and then they toned her down a bit, and she's now actually one of the most balanced champions in the game, if you ask me. But unfortunately, those positives weren't enough. The team took on way too many ambitious projects and made way too many drastic changes to the game. The game felt unfinished, like it was still in beta. Rather than creating a solid foundation first and then experimenting, they chose to experiment with the pile of crap they unfortunately had to deal with. By 2023, there were pretty much 0 devs on the team that were there once the game started. When you're at that point, the solution isn't to rapidly change, but rather solidify what you can. Come up with a unified concept, otherwise everything else you do will just evolve into a chaotic mess. Paladins is dead because of crummy leadership and a parent company that failed to utilize a proper gem in their roster. With proper funding, direction, and advertising, the game could have been great, but it isn't. And it wasn't. I fell out of love with Paladins pretty much December 2024. And even then it was a decline from November, October for me. I just couldn't deal with playing a game that was getting so shifted in every single direction at the same time. It just wasn't fun anymore. To be honest, I don't think this was going to be avoided. And namely, that's because Smite is also dead. If it was just Paladins going out, I think there was probably some hope for Paladins. But the fact that Smite and Paladins were both killed at the same exact time, that goes to show that I don't think the game was going to be saved whatsoever. I don't think Hi-Rez ever had plans of letting the game continue past this point. Unless by some miracle it did insane numbers, you know? Because Smite is Hi-Rez's cash cow. That's their big moneymaker. So I don't want to say that these past 2 years are what solidified the fate of Paladins, but I do want to say that these past 2 years certainly weren't perfect, and that this really doesn't come as a surprise to me, and I feel like it shouldn't come as a surprise to a lot of people. The game has been on the decline for a while now. It's really sad to see a game with such a fun concept go, and especially a wonderful community. I have made a lot of awesome friends through this community. This was the first gaming community I really actually delved into. In fact, my first and only cosplay was Nyx. I cosplayed Nyx herself. Like, I had a great time with it, but unfortunately, it's dead. And there's nothing that can really be done. There's hope that some rich company might pick it up with devs who love it, blah, blah, blah. I don't know, whatever happens. All I know is I'm moving to Marvel Rivals. I'm having a lot more fun with that game. As for the Paladins versus Overwatch series, I'm not going to do that anymore. I've kind of lost drive for it, honestly. And the most recent videos haven't been doing too well, so I'm just going to move on to something else. I'll still consider myself a person who loved and played Paladins, but I don't know. I'm just gonna live, laugh, love. I do feel really bad for the devs because I do know there was a lot of actual passion there. There just wasn't a lot of direction. So their passion, rather than turning into progress, turned more into chaos. Rip in peace, Paladins. You are the most chaotic game I ever loved. See ya.